Tonight on CBC Vancouver News.
He is, of course, determined and positive.
We are relieved to hear that the prognosis is good.
Well wishes pour in for BC's Premier after he's diagnosed with cancer for a second time. Also,
this is a fragile balance that we're in.
COVID hospitalizations remain stubbornly high in BC, but each new infection is not spreading to as many people. And mammoth donation. $100 million to help build the Vancouver Art Gallery's new building. There's still a ways to go, though.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Good evening. Thanks for joining us. For the second time in his life, BC's Premier has been diagnosed with cancer. Our Isabelle Regem joins us live with more. Isabelle, what is the Premier sharing about his health now?
Dan, Premier John Horgan first revealed last week that doctors had found a growth in his throat. Now he says he went in for surgery, which he says was successful, along with a biopsy. And today he says those results showed the growth is cancerous. He did not speak publicly today, but in a statement says he will begin radiation in the next couple of weeks and will continue into December, adding, "My prognosis is good, and I expect to make a full recovery. And I am grateful to the amazing healthcare team for all the support I've received."
And Isabelle, we've seen it online, we've seen it on TV today. Plenty of good wishes being sent to the Premier from across this country. What's the reaction in the legislature here?
He's been receiving well wishes from MLAs across party lines. Horgan says he will still take part virtually in briefings, cabinet meetings, and other important meetings. But for in-person events, Minister Mike Farnworth and other cabinet ministers may attend in his place. He also named Minister Farnworth as his deputy premier today.
Anything that I'm required to do, obviously I will do. Yesterday I did chair cabinet, but beyond that, what I know is the Premier wants to get back here as soon as possible, and he's upbeat and in good spirits, and he'll be doing his treatments. And I think all of us, in fact I know all of us, wish him the best.
Cancer is a terrifying word for anyone to hear. And so I want to today let Premier Horgan and his family know that they are in our thoughts, that we are relieved to hear that the prognosis is good.
Horgan beat cancer a first time after being diagnosed with bladder cancer in 2008 when he was in his 40s. Dan Horgan says he looks forward to being back in the legislature and traveling in the new year.
Isabelle Regem reporting live for us tonight. Thank you.
Thanks.
Vancouver police are hoping you can help them find a suspect after a violent home invasion sent a senior to hospital with life-threatening injuries. Take a look. The forces released this footage of the suspect. They say they entered the victim's home near East 35th and Victoria Drive on October 29th through an unlocked front door. Police believe the suspect attacked the 89-year-old homeowner when they confronted the intruder and then fled before officers arrived.
We don't know if this was a disguise, or we don't know if this suspect actually came from a construction site. What we do believe is that this was a property crime offender who had an opportunity to commit a crime.
Police say the victim remains in serious condition in hospital. They consider this a public safety risk and don't believe the suspect and the victim knew each other. If you recognize this person or know or saw anything, you are asked to contact Vancouver Police. As arts announcements go, today's does not get much bigger. A pledge to finally get a new Vancouver art gallery from dream to reality. And while some big bucks were thrown at the project, as Justin McElroy tells us, there are still a lot of questions about whether cash will actually lead to a new building.
I am pleased to announce today that our family foundation will this morning sign an agreement to support the proposed project to the tune of $100 million.
Polygon Homes founder Michael O'Dane making the biggest donation to an art gallery in Canadian history. A big day for a big fundraising campaign, but this is a story that has been going on for more than 12 years. The reason this is so complicated is the art gallery's ambitions for the new building, to be located in a parking lot owned by the city across the street from the stadium's SkyTrain station. Budgeted originally at $350 million, the plan was to get $100 million from both the provincial and federal government. So far, only $50 million from BC is committed, and the budget has gone up since. Still, today was a day for optimism.
This is top of the agenda for when I speak with Mr. LeBlanc about how this project has now evolved in a way that I think more closely matches federal priorities.
Those priorities include consulting with local First Nations on the design, and a promise it will be the first passive house art gallery in North America, reducing its ecological footprint. In a statement, the federal government said they acknowledge an application for funding has been submitted under the Green Buildings Program, but no decision has been made yet. A continued question mark on a day that was all smiles for a building many people hope one day will be its own work of art. Justin McElroy, CBC News, Vancouver.
Major League Soccer has now named the independent legal team that will look into the Vancouver Whitecaps. Toronto-based law firm Rubin Tomlinson handles workplace investigations. It will examine the Whitecaps' internal decisions and actions after allegations of sexual assault against 2 coaches years ago, as well as what former players describe as a cover-up. BC has recorded nearly 600 new positive cases of COVID-19, while the rolling average continues to tilt down. Vancouver Coastal Health posted the lowest daily case count today at 46. The positivity rate for BC's second most populous health authority has been lowest since mid-August. 438 people are now in hospital. About 1 in 4 of those patients are in intensive care. And 8 more people have died in our province. The province has now reached a death toll of 2,200 people. Now, the transmission of the coronavirus is on a downward trend. BC's latest modeling shows COVID-19 is declining in the province. Health officials attribute that to widespread vaccination. Bill Puri is following the numbers and more for us. Bill, what are health officials saying today?
Well, daily reports of new cases are still in the 500, 600 range, yet the news is encouraging. The numbers are going down, but they're going down slowly. Health officials say COVID-19 is now a preventable disease in BC, particularly when it comes to severe illness and hospitalization. The COVID-19 reproductive number in BC is at or below 1 across the entire province. That means that each new confirmed case of the virus spreads on average to just 1 person or less.
Where we are right now, we should continue to see a steady decline in cases and hospitalizations over the next month. But this is a fragile balance that we're in. But it is an important balance. And when we look at what we could be at had we not had vaccination, right now, we would have been in a very different situation in this province.
That said, BC children aged 5 to 11 are contracting COVID-19 at higher rates than other pediatric age groups. Between October 26th and November 1st, there were 550 new cases across the province. The rising number is a reflection, officials say, of transmission in areas where the vaccination rates are low. Parents are advised to get younger children registered for vaccination so that they're ready once the vaccine is available, likely in a few weeks.
So, Bill, slow and steady, those numbers are going down, but we have to acknowledge there's a significant risk that remains.
Absolutely, particularly for the elderly. Fully vaccinated seniors made up nearly half of the COVID deaths in BC last month. A majority of those dying are 80 years of age and older. Now, the reality is, with age, we don't retain as much protection from vaccine as we do when we're younger, and its strength wanes faster. So the concern is that unvaccinated people are still passing the virus on to older vaccinated people.
And what this tells us, what Dr. Henry's modeling tells us, is the absolute need to continue to increase our dose 1 vaccination and our dose 2 vaccination in addition to getting your booster doses when you're invited to do so. This is absolutely critical.
Last month, unvaccinated people made up 60% of new cases and 72% of hospitalizations. And that's taking a toll on the healthcare system. 100 ICU patients have now been moved from the north to hospitals on Vancouver Island and the Lower Mainland, 9 just since Sunday. Officials say this isn't the time to let up on precautions to keep yourself and your family safe. And to that end, they continue to drive home the need for vaccinations.
Bill Puri joining us live tonight. Thank you, Bill. Almost 91% of eligible British Columbians have gotten at least one dose of a COVID vaccine. And while there are all kinds of reasons that the 9% are not yet vaccinated, one of them is fear of the jab itself, needle phobia. Lindsay Duncombe explains the strategies being used to help those people get protected.
It's more than just a little trepidation that keeps Paul Friedlander from getting fully vaccinated, more like terror.
My brain and my body just do not let me get this injection.
It took 3 visits to different clinics before the 12-year-old got his first dose of the COVID-19 vaccine, thanks to a nurse named Rosa Kay.
She spent over an hour, I would say, with Paul, talking him through it, having creative approaches.
But when it came to the second shot, Paul just ran away.
And it wasn't a success, which was bad.
Experts estimate that about a quarter of Canadians are scared of needles to some degree, but about 4% have a full-fledged phobia, and the number is likely higher in children.
If you actually have a fear of needles, that can be the only reason that's preventing you from getting vaccinated.
Researchers at the University of Toronto have developed a strategy to reduce fear-related hesitancy, and it's using videos like this to share the message.
C is for comfort. Make sure you're comfortable when you get your vaccine.
They call it the CARD system, standing for Comfort, Ask, Relax, Distract. It's the strategy the Centre for Addiction and Mental Health in Toronto uses at special clinics for needle-phobic patients, adults and children. The cubicles are private. There are toys as distractions, and the staff take extra time.
These adaptations are fairly simple strategies, and I do think that a lot more effort can be made to just have them available in general clinics.
That sounds a lot like how the nurse helped Paul get his first shot. His mom is trying to find her for the second dose. No luck yet.
So what do you think? Do you think if we found Rosa, do you think maybe we would have a chance? Or do you think
a big chance?
Yeah?
He hasn't given up on overcoming his fear. Lindsay Duncombe, CBC News, Vancouver.
One man has been hurt after the helicopter he was flying crashed on eastern Vancouver Island today. Nanaimo RCMP say the chopper crashed in a forest near Nanoose Bay around 12:30. The pilot was taken to hospital by BC paramedics. Alberta-based HeliQuest Aviation owns the helicopter. The company's director of safety says the pilot suffered non-life-threatening injuries and is doing fine. He says both the company and the RCMP are investigating the crash. 3 men have now been charged for the alleged assault of Vancouver police officers at English Bay this past summer. 2 adults and a youth have been charged with assaulting and obstructing an officer. It happened on June 18th when police responded to calls of a large fight near the beach. The responding officers were surrounded by the crowd after arresting someone. 3 officers were injured. Former BC Lions receiver Josh Bowden has been found guilty of killing his ex-girlfriend. 33-year-old Kimberly Lynn Halgarth was found dead in her Burnaby home in March 2009. Bowden was later charged with second-degree murder. Once a promising high school prodigy, he played for the BC Lions in the 2006-07 CFL season, but he was cut from the team in 2008 after he was charged with assaulting Halgarth. In 2011, Bowden was found guilty of multiple sexual assault charges. The Crown says sentencing for his murder conviction will be finalized at a later date. The Parole Board of Canada has rejected an appeal filed by a man convicted of murder in the 2016 killing of a Japanese student in Vancouver. William Schneider was found guilty of second-degree murder for the death of Natsumi Kogawa. Schneider was asking the board to take another look at an earlier decision that denied him parole. Schneider insisted Kogawa's death was an accident, but he later pleaded guilty to interfering with human remains. The Parole Board appeal previously concluded Schneider is an untreated sexual offender and remains a high risk to the community. BC's gang crime unit has arrested several alleged members of the Brothers Keepers gang.
Investigations into the Brothers Keepers in general identified the primary income source as drug trafficking, including fentanyl production and trafficking. The terrible impact of fentanyl on British Columbia has been well documented and cannot be understated.
It's part of a 3-year investigation by the Combined Forces Special Enforcement Branch. This led to the arrest of 6 people who have now been charged with numerous crimes, including drug offenses. Investigators say they seized almost more than 11 kilograms of drugs, weapons, and more than $50,000 in cash. Hindus, Jains, Sikhs, Buddhists, and others are celebrating Diwali today, the Festival of Lights. This year, the festivities may seem a bit brighter with the return of some in-person events. Our Benit Brach is taking in a Diwali celebration in Surrey. Benit, what's happening where you are?
Well, Dan, it's vibrant, it's bright. I'm just outside the Hindu temple, right across the Sikh Gurdwara. Side by side, community members are lighting candles, they're praying, they're eating, and some are celebrating in other ways.
We're just going to put out the offerings now.
From Rangoli art, divas, sweets, and more, Diwali for this family is a vibrant celebration. But this year, they're spending it closer to home than usual.
We're just keeping it a close family celebration because of COVID.
Before the pandemic, the Batirak surgeries to those in need.
We try to think of it as bringing literal light.
For others, this year marks a return for more community connection.
This year, people are excited. We do full decorations on the temple and lighting and everything.
Diwali has different histories and stories for Hindus, Sikhs, Jains, and some Buddhists. Each has different ways of celebrating. At this Sikh Gurdwara, right across the Hindu temple, community members are gathering to celebrate Diwali in their own respective ways. Just here, clay oil lamps known as divas or diyas are being lit. Tonight, this will be blanketed with candles, surrounded by people, a symbol of light over darkness, good over evil.
Community gathering is always happy, you know.
And safety is a priority.
We are asking everybody to wear the mask when they come in.
I think that we are still in the road to recovery from the pandemic, and we wanted to provide options to people to be able to celebrate Diwali in some form.
These dance performances are also part of a virtual showcase. Back at the Bhatias, this year may not be the Diwali they're used to, but they're optimistic.
Diwali has become something that's a celebration of light, of family, of hope, of gathering together.
Something she soon hopes to celebrate again in India. The celebrations don't end today. Other cultural events like Diwali Fest and the Canucks game that also offers Diwali celebrations are happening this week. Dan?
Benit Brach reporting live from Surrey. Thanks very much. The Canucks, as Benit said, will sport special jerseys in their warm-up this Friday in celebration of Diwali. Take a look at these. The commemorative sweaters were made by local South Asian artist Jag Nagra. The limited number will be on for sale at Friday's home game against Nashville. As part of the celebration, the Canucks for Kids Fund is donating $20,000 to Guru Nanak's Free Kitchen and Kids Play Foundation. Meteorologist Johanna Wagstaffe joins us now with the forecast. Joe, we got to talk about something in the sky. People haven't been this excited by something outdoors since that gray whale swam into False Creek. What was out there?
I think you're right. Yeah. Dan, we just saw potentially the most vivid rainbow ever spotted in Vancouver. Take a look. Just about, let's see, an hour ago, a double rainbow stretched across our skies. Truly stunning. I don't know if there was a single person that wasn't looking out through their windows or out on the streets, but you said it. This was the outdoor moment of the year. We get these because, of course, lingering raindrops. The sunlight passes through them, bending the light and then reflecting them. And we get a double if that reflection happens twice, which is why this second rainbow is actually reversed, in case you were wondering. Roygabib done backwards, you could say. So this is rainbow weather. I should do a nightly rainbow chance forecast, but we've got that in the cards with clearing skies. It does have to be right, and that was pretty special. Rain is back in the long-range forecast. We will look for these breaks, though, these surprise breaks between bands. The next low pressure system already lingering off our coast. That's going to put the rain back in our forecast zone for tomorrow. I think tomorrow the bigger temperature, because I think at this point we're all used to the rain, 10 to 15 millimeters, will actually be the winds and the dropping temperatures. So I'll talk more about that as we head into the weekend and, I don't know, see if I can find any more rainbows in the forecast.
Yeah, Koi versus Otter doesn't have anything on this. Thanks, Joe.
No chance. You're welcome.
With Christmas already in some people's sights, Canada Post has unveiled its shipping deadlines for the upcoming holiday season. The deadlines depend on what you're trying to send and where you want it to go. If you plan to send a package regionally, send it by December 15th. But if you're hoping to ship something across the country and to the U.S., best to get it in by December 9th. Canada Post also strongly suggests you use its service alerts to be up to date on disruptions and delays. The investigation into serious misconduct in the Canadian military is being handed over to the civilian justice system, where the military will no longer be in charge after this. Thank you for staying with us during our commercial-free live stream. Hello to everyone watching from across the North America. For 20 years, the Stadacona Band has performed a special Remembrance Day Veterans Concert in Nova Scotia. This year, they're mixing things up. As Colleen Jones reports, a young Indigenous singer is part of that change.
The storied Stadacona Band and 15-year-old grade 10 Lockview High student Dee Dee Austin. This is just their second rehearsal together. The young singer-songwriter wrote this for the revamped Remembrance Day show.
Call of Duty, I wrote originally to remember the veterans, you know what I mean? Like what they did for us. I thought it was really important to put that into a song, and then I got the opportunity to perform with the Stadacona Band. And I was like, holy crap, like this fits perfectly, like, but yeah.
We've focused a lot on the world wars for a long time, and that's never, ever, ever going away.
That's Sailor First Class Tony Taylor, who's also a Stadacona Band member. Revamping the traditional show took reflection.
Decided we wanted to diversify the kind of number of stories that we wanted to tell, the types of people that we're remembering, and that kind of takes twofold. One is digging more into the world wars and finding stories of Indigenous veterans, of Black Canadian stories like the No. 2 Construction Battalion.
They broke the boundaries of all trust.
To honor the diversity among veterans, this piece, called Buried Truth, written by Dee Dee Austin to honor her great-grandmother, a residential school survivor.
When they're done, you won't recognize yourself. So the hardest part of the song to write was definitely the pre-chorus, and the pre-chorus is where I mentioned that they cut our hair and they scarred our skin, because my great-grandmother experienced that.
The concert is Sunday afternoon at the Spatz Theatre. There will also be a poem read by Second World War veteran Irene Nash, and of course, the band. Colleen Jones, CBC News, Halifax.
The investigation and prosecution of sexual misconduct in Canada's military is going to be handed over to the civilian justice system. Retired Supreme Court Justice Louise Arbour will be leading an external review into the misconduct in the Canadian military, which has traditionally policed its own members. As Ashley Burke tells us, many have long wanted the government to take this step.
Retired Canadian Forces member Stephanie Veto went public in April, accusing Vice Admiral Hayden Edmondson of raping her in 1991 on board a Navy ship. She says she didn't trust the military to investigate since Edmondson was the head of HR and denied any wrongdoing. Veto had one request to the military: bring in civilian police to investigate.
I want justice for me, but I also want justice for others.
military police turned down her request and investigated, but now has turned her case over to civilian prosecutors to determine if charges should be laid or not. Her lawyer said today's development is welcome news.
This was a great announcement. She was absolutely asking for this early in the process. She was concerned about how her allegations would be handled by the military justice system.
Defense Minister Anita Anand announced she's accepting a recommendation to transfer military sexual misconduct cases to civilian police to investigate and civilian courts to prosecute.
There's always been concern that the military can't investigate itself, particularly when it comes to senior leaders. So for me, I think it's really positive that this is one of the first steps of action that the minister is taking.
A first step prompted by a retired Supreme Court justice. The government tasked Louise Arbour with reviewing the military sexual misconduct crisis. She gave this interim recommendation last month to Anand's predecessor, Defense Minister Harjit Sajjan, saying these reoccurrent allegations of historical sexual misconduct against senior CAF leaders and the related Canadian Forces National Investigation Service investigations have led me to conclude that immediate remedial action are necessary to start restoring trust in the CAF.
It's unclear right now how many cases could be passed on to civilians. The first step for the government is figuring out a process to do that and finding out what police forces could take the cases on. There's no date yet for when that could happen or how long this interim measure could last. Ashley Burke, CBC News, Ottawa.
The United Kingdom is the first country to approve a COVID-19 antiviral pill. Research suggests it could cut some patients' chance of dying or even being hospitalized by half. One Canadian expert says the benefits are twofold.
At the end of the day, if you can stop people from needing to go into hospital, then that actually both obviously helps that individual patient as well as helps the healthcare system.
Pharmaceutical company Merck has submitted preliminary data to Health Canada. There's no timeline yet for a decision. It's also looking to distribute the antiviral to other parts of the world and says it will adjust prices based on a country's ability to pay. With the new House of Commons session getting underway in about 2 weeks, all members sitting in Parliament have to be vaccinated or have a recognized exemption. CBC News has learned that some Conservative MPs are still unvaccinated. As Travis Danraj tells us, the party is planning to fight the new rules.
Well, CBC News reached out to all 119 Conservative members to find out their vaccination status because after multiple attempts trying to get that information through the party, we were unsuccessful. The party not disclosing that information. The Liberals, the Green Party, the Bloc Québécois, and the NDP all came back to us, all said that their MPs are fully vaccinated except for one Liberal MP with a medical exemption. The Conservatives were not responding. 81 of those Conservative MPs got back to us, said that they are fully vaccinated. 3 said that they did not want to disclose, and then 35 did not respond to our request for comment. But we are told by a source that there's a handful of Conservative MPs, fewer than 10, that remain unvaccinated. And this is going to cause a major issue for them trying to get into the House of Commons because under the current rules, they cannot do that. Leader Aaron O'Toole has said that he is going to fight that when the House of Commons resumes on November 22nd, that he is going to raise a point of privilege. And that process, if the Speaker believes it should be debated, could take some time. It could be then referred to committee, then could go back to the House, then there could be a vote. So we could be talking about weeks here where there are several Conservative MPs sitting at home, not participating in Parliament. And it has really become a distraction for the party. So we will see how long this takes to resolve and whether or not the party actually tells us definitively how many of their MPs are not vaccinated. Aaron O'Toole says he's encouraging vaccination, but he's also pushing for in-person Parliament, which creates a problem for some of those members. Travis Danraj, CBC News, Ottawa.
When we are ready to come back and we are ready to really move into a post-pandemic world, that the arts will be ready.
Now $100 million for the Vancouver Art Gallery as the arts sector rethinking what the future can bring. That's next.
British Columbia is making it easier for people in search of their past to find it. The province brought in a new adoption law today. It allows adopted children and biological parents the right to check files that have been kept secret up till now. We have more on all this from Terry Malewski.
BC's new legislation gives adults who were adopted the right to go to a government office and apply for the information that some have wanted for years. Who are they and where do they come from?
I'm waiting a long time to do this. I've stopped and I go and I stop and I go.
Nervously, Samara Doucette is trying to find out who her parents are.
I have 2 children now, so that's why I'm doing it, for their history.
The new law gives her the right to that history. Adopted children, once they're 19 years old, are now entitled to know the names of their biological parents, and parents are entitled to know the names of the children they gave up for adoption. But they can still keep their secrets by filing a disclosure veto or a no-contact order to safeguard their identities or prevent contact with a parent or child. There are 50,000 adoptees living in BC. Just over 1,800 objections have been filed. Doucette does not know if her mother filed one of them. If she did, she'll never find her father either.
She's the one that holds the key to my father. And if there's a veto put on it, I may never know. And it's really hard.
So BC's new legislation allows you to keep a secret, but only if you file a veto. And privacy advocates fear that parents or children living elsewhere who may not know they need to file a veto could find their secrets being disclosed without their approval. Even so, the government calls this a victory for the right to know.
It's a great day.
But BC's minister responsible, who is adopted herself, says the law allows access to information which adoptees desperately want.
There's patches that are missing. And so it's just like pieces of your life that are missing about which you know nothing.
The need to know is relevant to Pretty's own case. She is recovering from cancer treatment.
I sure would have liked to know something about my medical history because I got a little tired of saying to people, I don't know, I don't know.
However, Pretty was adopted outside of BC. She's not entitled to the facts about her parents. For those who are,
And that's it.
some doors are opening. Terry Malewski, CBC News, Vancouver.
Here are some of the stories we're following tonight for you on CBC Vancouver News.
I want to, on behalf of our entire caucus, ensure that the Premier knows that he has our support. We will be thinking of him in the weeks and months ahead.
As someone who has dealt with cancer and survived before, he understands both, I think, the challenges, but also he's engaging with real optimism.
Opponents and supporters of many stripes are wishing Premier John Horgan well. Today, Horgan announced he has been diagnosed with cancer after a biopsy for a growth on his throat last week. Horgan says his prognosis is good and he expects to make a full recovery. He'll start radiation treatment in the next few weeks.
This is now a preventable disease, particularly severe illness, hospitalizations.
BC's top doctor says we are in a fragile balance with COVID-19 right now. Cases are going down slowly, but children aged 5 to 11 are contracting the disease at higher rates than any other young age groups. And fully vaccinated seniors made up nearly half of the COVID deaths here in the last month. The concern is unvaccinated people are still passing the virus to older vaccinated people.
I'm just delighted with the changes and the not only the new look at the building, but it's a lot more functional inside, in my opinion.
The Vancouver Art Gallery's push for a new venue got a massive boost today. $100 million from Michael O'Dane, the chair of Polygon Homes. The new gallery is set to be built on a parking lot at George and Cambie, right across from the CBC. Gallery leaders still have to raise another $160 million. As Justin McElroy reported earlier, the Vancouver Art Gallery is reaping the benefits of the largest private donation to an arts institution, $100 million. Meanwhile, the Arts Umbrella had its most successful fundraiser ever just last month, bringing in $1.5 million for youth programs. Large donations. For more, we're joined by Howard Jang. He is interim executive director of the BC Alliance for Arts and Culture. Howard, we've heard the stories about how the pandemic has hit the arts community especially hard in Metro Vancouver and BC. Frankly, across Canada, some of them artists losing space, losing donors. What is it to have these large donations?
Well, first of all, it is such a significant donation by Michael and Yoshi. It's just incredible to see, and as you say, I understand it is one of the largest, certainly for a public gallery. The real challenges that we all are facing within the arts and cultural sector has so much to do with the fact that we were one of the first, as we've all been hearing, to really be hit by the pandemic, and just our business just crashed. And it's all, in all likelihood, we would be one of the last to return. And I think what this opportunity or this situation that has arisen with what the Art Gallery was able to achieve is actually a sign of optimism. A sign that really that when we are ready to come back and we are ready to really move into a post-pandemic world, that the arts will be ready. And what the pandemic has actually shown us is how to the edge we all are living in the arts and cultural sector, in our spaces, in the way that we work, in the way that support and funding has really been a challenge for us. I know we've had, in some ways, some help through some of the emergency programs, and that's really actually shown how programs such as potentially basic income could really work. And so maybe coming out of this, we're going to have to learn some new lessons as to what is really going to be needed to support this sector.
$100 million is a lot of money, Howard, but there's still a lot of money left to raise. So what happens with that?
Well, there's two aspects of it. When I read the press release, Mr. O'Dane acknowledged that this was going to give them the real opportunity to finish the project. But you're right, there is a significant amount of money still to raise, around $100 to $160 million. And that is going to come out of the community. So I think we have to be aware that still, with the money left to raise for the rest of the project, is going to have an impact on the way in which money is available to the arts in general overall.
Howard Jang, thank you very much for your time.
My pleasure.
It is regarded as one of the climate's big problems. Coal. At COP26, 40 countries have now promised to end its use, but there are some glaring omissions. The challenge to get everyone on board is next. And earlier today, it was rainbow weather. Take that, Wales. Johanna breaks down the chance of rainbows to come next.
It's like a huge area. How many bears can we expect to see here?
25, 30, maybe a bit more than that, within a 5-kilometer radius. Watch a bear long enough, you'll see his eyes. When they're worried, you can tell they're just worried to death. When they're happy, when they experience joy, they experience to the maximum. They're super happy. When they get mad, all the white of his eyes turns blood red. All the blood flushes into his eyes, so it just looks like a devil.
I noticed you got a picture up there on your sun visor, Dennis. What's that all about?
I've seen that. That's my old buddy. That's my pal Dancer. You never heard of my pal Dancer, right?
No, I haven't.
No.
Oh, cool. I met him 25 years ago. I was driving a buggy and he was walking by, little cub, seen me, and he come running over to where I was standing at the back of the buggy, and he was quite curious. So I thought, this is pretty cool. So I ducked down at the back of the buggy, and he couldn't see me. He stood on his back legs, and you know how you try to peer like that. Mm-hmm. And then when I got up, he looked like he was all wobbly. He looked like he was dancing, right? So I said, hey, this is a little dancer. Anyway, we played this game for the 3 weeks I was there, and I disappeared for the year, and I went back the next year, and he was there again with his mom, and he recognized me. And he come over and he wanted to play the game again. So that happened for about 2 or 3, 4 years. And then I never went back to the Cape for 5 or 6 years after that. So I had my own little buggy, and I was parked not too far from here, 50 kilometers from the Cape. I woke up in the morning and I was having a coffee, and all of a sudden, the buggy I was in, I heard a big whoomp like that, just shook. I thought, oh my Lord, what's going on? And I kind of peeked out the window, and there's this huge, huge bear there. Come here, come on, come on. Yeah, it's me. Come and visit. Come on. And as soon as he seen me, he stood up and walked backwards. It was Dancer. He found me after 6 or 7 years. And for the next 2 weeks, he stayed right by my window until the bay froze over, then he left. And he did that for the next 6 years. He come and found me this time of the year, and he stayed beside me. He stayed with me, right? Scratch him behind the ear, scratch him on the nose.
Did he always have the distinctive marking on his face, or when did
Well,
it come?
yeah, you know, he was a real ladies' man. You know, he was pretty incredible. He was. I know. That's my bear.
In the year 2050, how will BC look? From agriculture to cities, how will climate change life? Don't miss 2050, Degrees of Change, a CBC Vancouver original podcast, now available.
Let's turn to COP26 in Glasgow, Scotland now. The host city once rose to economic prominence through the power of coal. Today, it was the stage for global promises to end its use. But as Carolyn Dunn reports, there are some noticeable exceptions.
Nothing hazy about the message. The days of emission-spewing coal are numbered.
I think we can say that the end of coal is in sight.
More than 45 countries, including Canada, have pledged to halt investment in coal-powered generation and agreed to wean themselves off coal power entirely by 2030 or 2040, depending on the wealth of the country.
Ending emissions from coal power is one of the single most important steps we must take.
In his second week into his new job as Canada's Environment Minister, Guilbeault spoke on behalf of the Global Alliance to power past coal.
A step that also improves overall public health.
Emissions from coal are the single biggest contributor to climate change, so canceling coal is essential to limit warming of the planet to 1.5 degrees. But youth climate activists at COP26 insist the pledge doesn't go far enough or fast enough for their future. Some of the world's most coal-dependent nations, including India, Australia, and the United States, didn't sign the pledge at all. That, say activists, gives China, the world's largest emitter, the political cover it needs to keep increasing its coal use.
China has 1,200 plants operating now. They have plans to build 150 more. And if there's a question of what can we do about climate right away, it's to not build any more coal plants.
There are calls to cut some slack for countries with emerging economies and for wealthy nations like the US, UK, and Canada to do the lion's share of cutting emissions and funding a greener energy transition.
They've been polluting and taking up an unfair share of the global atmosphere with their carbon pollution for over a century, and they have the wealth to show for it.
Now, do they have the will to follow through on another ambitious pledge? Carolyn Dunn, CBC News, Calgary.
Meteorologist Johanna Wagstaffe joins us now with the forecast. Joe, remind us, when are you are heading to COP. When are you going?
That's right, Dan. Leaving tomorrow, I'll be there for the second week of negotiations. So looking forward to checking in with you. But Dan, the second week is really the nuts and bolts of all of these big pledges. You know, all of sort of the heads of state get back on their plane after making these big announcements like the coal one today, showing their commitment to reducing warming. And then it comes down to actually working out how we're going to do that, how we're going to track that, and in the end, how close we can get to the science. So I'll be checking in with you each day starting Monday. Let me show you the long range then. I better get that out of the way before I hop on a flight over the ocean. We've got very cold air coming down from the Arctic, kicking off our weekend on a chilly note. We'll see most of that Arctic air up towards the northwest. It's a modified Arctic air mass for the rest of BC, but that does drop our snow levels. I know you've been, we've all been watching that snow forecast for quite some time. We had a dusting on the locals earlier this season, but it has since melted with these warmer temperatures, getting back into the snow for this weekend. So rain returns tomorrow through most of the day. It's more showery, and we'll also be watching for gusty winds with this one, close to the water, 60 to 70 kilometer per hour gusts. But we'll notice that drop in temperatures. I would say Friday, Saturday, Sunday, getting close to glove weather. You know, that kind of weather where you get wet and your hands immediately get cold. We sort of avoided that this week. Start thinking about pulling out the mitts for the next couple of days. Temperatures across the interior will be into the minuses for your morning temperatures, warming back up to 6s for Prince George, Williams Lake, probably more like a 4 or 5 up towards Fort St. John. And I think we'll see some sunshine in the afternoon for the interior. Cranbrook is sort of reversed, waking up to some showers, then it'll get back into the sunshine. Kootenay's always sort of half a day behind the weather in the interior. And steady rain, Prince George, you've got wind gusts to, Prince Rupert, I should say, wind gusts to 70 kilometers per hour, Prince George. More like 40 for tomorrow. I was watching those winds because this next system is bringing them in across the whole province. Okay, so breaking it down for us, a 10 tomorrow, coming back down to a seasonal for this time of the year. Showers lingering through the weekend, but the weekend showers not as steady as the rain we've been seeing. It's going to be more showery. We may get a few breaks in between those rains to see the sunshine. Notice those overnight lows though. Saturday night, Sunday night, probably some of our coolest temperatures yet. Monday, it looks like we start to recover slightly, but I don't see a big clear out in the long range forecast anytime soon. I mean, we are getting into one of our wettest months of the entire year, and certainly November has started off that way. So Dan, at least we've got the snow to look forward to on the locals. I'm thinking by Monday morning, 10 to 20 fresh centimeters up there.
And it can stay up there because that's where it should be. Joe, thanks so much. We look forward to your reports from Glasgow, and we will be checking in with you. Awesome. Thanks.
Sounds good.
You may have heard of the sustainabilities, young people across BC united by the urgency to stop global climate catastrophe. In a 4-part series with our Creator Network, we're speaking with members of the movement who all have a different take on how to be a climate crisis activist. In this third installment, we chat with an organizer who looks at the state of climate education in Canada.
Hi, my name is Naomi Young, my Chinese name is Lang Puyan, and I'm an 18-year-old climate and racial justice activist, and I organize with Sustainability Teens and Climate Education Reform BC. I'm a Chinese-Malaysian settler and uninvited guest on unceded and unsurrendered Musqueam, Tsawwassen, Kwantlen, and Cowichan First Nations territories, or colonially known as Richmond, British Columbia. In this episode, I'm going to explore the state of climate education in Canada. As young people, we know that the climate crisis is the biggest threat to our future. But are we being given the tools and knowledge to address it? To get a better picture of the state of climate education in Canada, I reached out to Dr. Ellen Field at Lakehead University. In 2018, Dr. Field conducted a survey that assessed Canadians' knowledge and perceptions of climate change and climate education. Hi, Dr. Field.
Hi, Naomi. How you doing?
Good. It's so great to see you. So in your opinion, do you think Canadians are aware of climate change and its risks?
So Canadians know that climate change is happening and that they're concerned about the risks it has to their lives. In my research, 79% of Canadians are concerned about the impacts of climate change, and 78% believe they're risks to people in Canada.
Would you say that Canadians have a good sense of climate science?
In general, Canadians think they're significantly more informed on the science than they actually are. And in my research, we had 10 questions around foundational climate science, and 43% of Canadians failed this brief knowledge test. The good news is that 86% of Canadians agree they need more information on climate change.
And with a background in education and as a researcher yourself, what would you say that educators and students need?
From the research, it was very clear that schools need to be doing more to educate young people, students, about climate change. It also shows, given the results we have, that there is wide support for schools to be doing more climate change education, and that there are current gaps in knowledge and understanding among our teachers, among our students, as well as real readiness to learn more. So this is where our policymakers really need to take leadership here and do everything they can to improve the quality of climate change education in our current systems.
Thank you so much for sharing your expertise today. Really appreciate it.
Hey, thanks so much for the invitation and the opportunity.
We can see that there are huge gaps in the supply of resources, training, and support for teachers, and a huge demand for an increase in preparing youth with climate solutions. These factors point to a need for systemic change to prepare youth and educators for the climate emergency. The reality is, students deserve better. We deserve to feel informed, engaged, and empowered through education in the face of a broken system. This is why for the past year, I've been working with Climate Education Reform BC, a youth-led movement advocating for an intersectional and justice-driven climate education in British Columbia. We know that youth deserve a voice in climate education. So working together with scientists, parents, students, and our community, we put together a set of needs that we think should be considered when building a climate educational system. Our full list is very comprehensive, but today I'm going to share some of the key things that we need to consider when implementing climate education. Number 1, scale. In order to adapt to the full scale of the climate crisis, climate justice education must be woven into all subjects in school classrooms. From social studies to sciences to math and career planning, educating students on climate solutions and how they can be a part of them is essential. Number 2, justice. Our education must describe how climate change does not affect people equally. Rather, climate change disproportionately hurts Indigenous, Black, and other communities of color and historically exploited populations the hardest. You can take a look at episode 2 in this series to learn more about intersectional environmentalism. Number 3, community care. Processing a global emergency is massively overwhelming. Therefore, our educational system must provide trauma-informed climate education. These spaces must enable youth to process their climate anxiety, grief, and emotions together in community so that resilience, joy, and hope can be fostered. Number 4, collective action. Because our school system reflects the priorities of society, we must collectively reimagine what education can look like. At the heart of this vision is a firm belief that if we are going to be effective, we must work together. In doing this, we can unlearn destructive patterns and recenter community care and our relationship with the environment. For most of my life, I didn't see myself in environmentalism because people like me were not represented. Now, through education, I've learned how valuable our voices are and how impactful women of color have been in the climate justice movement. What if our educational system taught us about the collective power we have to face the biggest crises of our time? Surely then we would be equipped to build a better world. I believe that this reality is attainable if we use our collective power to call on our governing bodies to create this reform. And we need your voice in the climate education movement.
It's not a Robert Munch classic, but it could be. A moose on the loose in an elementary school. It's a true tale coming up.
Lighting rehearsal for the drag show at the Rotary Arts Centre in Corner Brook, a smaller theatre in the basement of City Hall that can house 90 plus. During the pandemic, less than 40.
So it's meant certainly more than a 50% reduction in our capacity, and that affects both our bottom line in terms of the box office receipts, and it also dramatically affects what we can afford to pay the people who are on the stage.
Performers used to make up to $1,000 for a show. The center can only offer a flat rate of $500 now. Smallwood says with government grants, the Arts Center won't close, but employees still need to get paid. The new vaccination pass has boosted customers' confidence who want to buy tickets for Christmas shows, but there is no room for them. They had hoped the Vax Pass would mean a return to full capacity, but so far that's just not the case. He's hoping the government will change those rules before December.
At the moment, every head has to be 3 feet apart. And so one head can take up 7 seats. And that's a lot of seats for one person. I'm hoping that if they don't allow 100% occupancy, that they will look at what we do and perhaps say, okay, you can leave 1 seat rather than 3.
I would like to see full houses come back to the centres.
1,000 seats here at the Arts and Culture Center in St. John's, but less than 500 people can take in a show. Aidan Flynn says it's a real challenge to make money right now.
But we've had to tailor off in terms, our marketing campaigns are a little smaller. Some of the operational aspects of it have to be tailored off a little bit.
Bands like The Once will hit this stage and many others soon with their Cross Island Christmas show. The band left some wiggle room in the schedule to add an extra night or cut back, depending on ticket sales. This is the second time they've had to perform their sought-after Christmas show during the pandemic. So how do you guys make any money?
That's a really good question. How do we guys make any money?
Well, we're artists, so we try really hard to figure out how to kind of make a teacher's salary, I guess.
Jokes aside, they are just happy to be back on stage, even if it has to be a more intimate feel. The pandemic has forced the band members into different jobs when they are not on stage.
We're a malleable bunch.
Yeah,
you know?
that's what I was
like
just thinking. Like the last bit of time is like, it's not like we've just been sitting and waiting for shows. Like you've been working in the studio.
Yeah.
I've actually been working with a wonderful kid homeschooling. Just like we've been doing everything that we can to make ends meet, to make sure that we can still do this when the opportunity comes up.
Yeah.
And for Flynn, he says that the Arts and Culture Centers are always in talks with public health about the future and what capacity is going to look like. Now, there's no timeline on when we'll start to see a full house, but the more audience members that are in those seats means the more those artists will get paid. Colleen Connors, CBC News, Corner Brook.
Hi, I'm Amy Bout, and here's what's in your CBC Vancouver inbox. Don't miss the 4th annual Vancouver Podcast Festival. Enjoy workshops and panels and connect with the podcasting community from the comfort of home. Get your tickets at vanpodfest.ca. And the Corleone Men's Choir marks its return to live performance with special Remembrance Day concerts on November 10th and 11th. Get tickets and learn more at corleone.org.
Only in this country, an unexpected ungulate made a surprise morning visit at a public school in Saskatoon. Moose on the loose in the area. It decided to stop by and smash through the window of a classroom just before school began. One student did have minor injuries but didn't need to be hospitalized. Once conservation officers arrived on the scene, they tranquilized it and moved the unconscious animal outdoors. The matriculating moose is said to be in good condition and expected to be relocated outside the city. Time now for a story about a supersized spud. No tater tot that. Discovered by a couple in New Zealand. They were digging up their garden when they found the titanic tuber just below the soil surface. They named it Doug because of how they dug it up. Doug's a big boy, too. Tips the scales at 7.8 kilograms. The Guinness World Record entry for heaviest potato so far is just short of 5 kilos. The couple say they've applied to Guinness and are waiting to hear back. And BC journalists and their stories were honored last night at the 2021 Jack Webster Journalism Awards, and some of our CBC Radio Canada colleagues took home some big prizes.
And the winner is Yvette Brand and Drew Carricus, CBC News Vancouver.
The pair won for Best Breaking News Reporting Radio for their coverage of the massive New Westminster Pier Park fire. And our colleague Francis Plourde at Radio-Canada won Best Reporting in a language other than English for his report on out-of-province travels in Whistler during the pandemic. Congratulations, félicitations to all the winners. Well done. And thanks for joining us tonight on CBC Vancouver News at 6. You can always watch our newscast on CBC Gem, the free app. We're also on Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram, or check us out on your website, cbc.ca/BC. Your next local news is at 11 o'clock after the National with Isabel Reguem. Have a good night.